all together.
Yes, we were.
Thanks for always calling in and being helpful.
You're welcome. I try. It gets me out of my leadership meeting.
Good, good.
Good break in the action.
I think it's good to have different perspectives on those calls.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Well, welcome everyone to the Site Operations Committee meeting here at the virtual Spring SWOG 2021. We're really grateful that you could all be with us this evening. We, as always, have a packed agenda, and if you haven't been part of Site Ops before, just to recap, this meeting is intended to be kind of a practical, everyday, boots on the ground kind of discussion about what really goes on in our programs, at our sites, what are the issues, the challenges. And sometimes I wish we were more inspirational because it feels like we're always addressing what's challenging, tough, broken, or could be better. But honestly, things are really actually much better than they've been in years prior. And thanks to all of your feedback, they just continue to get better yet. So we have some of our usual suspects presenting and sharing with us tonight, very good friends of ours who help us build a better universe for all of us to do this very important clinical trials work. So the agenda is before you here. We're going to cover some information from the National Cancer Institute, some SWOG leadership updates. We'll close with a lot of really great information from CTSU and go from there. So as we begin, next slide, please. We're going to just share a few announcements. ORP stands for the Oncology Research Professionals in SWOG. We have some additional sessions that are really important. I would encourage you to check these out tomorrow. It's the OISHI Symposium. We have a really great overview of the nursing research that's going on through the committee and also some pharmaceutical science background and sharing and updates that are really important. And then the ORP Open Forum, it overlaps a little bit, but try to catch that if you can as well. Next slide, please. Basically, everyone on this call is part of the ORP. We're referred to as ORP or the ORP, as I like to call us. We are the ORP. SWOG is one of the groups that holds a very fundamental conviction and recognizes the crucial role that ORPs play in the analysis, implementation, development of all of the work that we do with our patients and enrolling people to our clinical trials. So if you're interested in getting more involved or you're not sure what we're about, there's a couple of things in the slide deck that you can reference. One is membership. We do have some openings. Next slide, please. There's a liaison committee, which serves as a group of people who are kind of a back and forth voice representing the real live, again, boots on the ground perspectives as we open trial. And they're typically linked to disease committees more often than not to help identify concerns early on in the development of a protocol, often review tools, give clinical implementation input, and they serve as communicators back and forth with protocol coordinators, investigators, scientists, and help out in that regard. Next slide, please. We do currently have a few liaison positions open, so if you're interested, Seal Petrowski and Sandy Annis are the chair of that committee, and or you can send a note in through the membership link that's on the SWOG homepage, the SWOG website. But early therapeutics and rare cancers are looking for a research nurse and CRA. Cancer control and prevention has a research nurse or CRA open. Gastrointestinal is looking for a nurse and leukemia needs a CRA. Next slide, please. We do have a new ORP webpage that Wendy Lawton built for us. And if you want to see that, it tells a little bit more about this group. And it's under the SWOG member resources and it's on the department pages. We've also put together for this meeting a new email, orp@swog.org. So if you have questions or you have topics that you'd like to request for the next meeting, feel free to send them in, and a few of us are monitoring that email, and we're going to try to see if that's a way that we can tighten our bond and communicate a little bit more back and forth. Next slide, please. Just some reminders that if you're trying to figure out who to ask for help at the Stat Center, there's contact information listed on the CRA workbench. We want to have you marking your calendars for fall 2021. We're hopeful that we'll see each other together in Chicago, but you never know. However, the dates for now are listed. So go ahead and mark your calendars. Next slide, please. Just want to flag how important the CRA workbench is. And one of the things that can be found there that Rodney will probably highlight as well is the CRA newsletter, which comes out now quarterly. And there are ways that you can make sure you're getting that. Next slide. This is what it looks like. And again, if you have ideas for the newsletter or want to submit something, there's a way that you can send that forward at cranewsletter@crab.org. Next slide. Should we be allowed to travel, the Hope Foundation has been extremely generous and always gives us an opportunity to support members to go to the SWOG meetings. So again, this is hopeful thinking. Maybe it's idealistic, but keep an eye open for this by summer. If there will be travel funds, we can access these and apply in the summer. Next slide, please. I just want to thank our executive committee who worked so hard to put the ins and outs of this meeting together and many things in between all year long. Their names are listed here, and if you have any connections with any of these folks, just thank them for their faithful, diligent service. Next slide. I'd like to introduce our first section of this meeting and welcome Andrea Denikoff and I believe Grace Mishkin, hopefully with her, to talk about some of the important things going on at the NCI. So I'm turning this over to you, Andrea, and Frank will advance your slides as you ask him to.
Okay, I think we just put a list of bullets, and I think Grace is trying to get in. I think she maybe just got in as a participant, but was trying to get in as a panelist too. So hopefully she'll join us momentarily where she can speak, because she's my partner in crime. We're a dynamic duo together. So if you go to the next slide. So if you haven't met us, I'm Andrea Denikoff and Grace Mishkin, and we both work on clinical trials operation issues for the NCTN. And I'm actually going to wait till Grace gets on.
I'm here, Andrea.
Oh, you are? Okay, great.
Yes, thank you.
Grace joined. All right, partner, you can go up first.
Sounds good. Sorry for my trouble joining, but so thanks everyone for having us today. And we just have brief updates. I think you're getting a lot of great information from the CTSU and from everyone at SWOG today. And there's not much that we have to add right now, but I did want to start with a huge thank you to everyone in this group. It was in large part due to feedback from this group, from everyone on this call and from your sites that we found out that there were significant concerns about the delegation of task log, the new policy that we were putting into place, requiring it across IND trials. And so the CTSU team and people at NCI have been working diligently since then, getting feedback from you additionally and making mock-ups and developments. And so I think an easier process is coming soon to be helpful across DTLs. We do want to get feedback from people, if the changes in the processes that are going to be in place aren't enough, if you still think it won't be possible for your sites to use DTLs for IND trials, even with these improvements, we do want to know, and if there's specific information, it's a balancing act, as I think I told you last time, where the goal is to meet the regulatory requirements for the DTLs in the IND trials and really sort of coming up to speed with regulations that we haven't necessarily been fully in line with previously, while also trying to make it as easy as possible for you at the sites. And we know it's not easy, and we know we can never do enough. So that's a big reason why we thank you. But we also do want to know when we're really asking something that's just not possible. So thank you for helping us with that. It's why we come to these meetings and why we love the chance to talk with you. And we wish you could be seeing you in person somewhere. So hopefully again soon, but we wanted to start off with that one. Andrea, did you want to touch on informed consent, or did you want me to?
Sure, I can do that one. And it's mostly just to let you know that, or as you know, Grace and I actually oversee issues related to the informed consent template and guide any changes that are needing. And the last revisions we made or updates was in 2018, and we do have a special email box that we, when we send that out, we always ask for feedback. So we've been getting sort of, let's say, dribs and drabs over the past year or so for some areas of interest people, would like improvements on. And so we've decided that 2021 is a year that we'd like to look at those and bring together a group of people, of course, including people like yourselves, to help us look at revisions and make some improvements. I think they were kind of areas all over the place, but some dealt with issues relating to privacy, return of results. Why did OHRP make us add 2 pages up front? Things that we can't necessarily fix, but we can try to work to improve. So Grace, if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, just to add that, I think the last time we really talked to you about the informed consent, it was letting you know that changes were coming and trying to sort of explain what the revision process was. So we're kind of excited now that you've been using it for a couple years now. It's always surprising to look down and see how long it's been. And so part of it also is that we want to get feedback from you about how it has been in practice, what, if there are things that as you have been using it have been easier or harder in working with patients through the consent process. So we'll be reaching out to you about that. We think it's a good time to take stock and see what changes we can make.
And then the topic of advanced practice providers. We actually just did a survey of our LAPS grant PIs, NCORE grant PIs, and ETCTN grant PIs, because we had gotten feedback from them that the CTEP investigators handbook policy, where every study agent had to have a co-signature for study agents, was creating a barrier for some sites. So CTEP leadership wanted to find out how much of a barrier it was. And we did find out that there is a lot of interest out there for CTEP leadership to consider some sort of modification to the current policy. So we're planning to have a series of meetings with the LAPS PIs coming up I think it's our next meeting, May 5th. The NCORE PI meeting that Dr. McCaskill-Stephen has with her PIs, and the ETCTN, to get input on how best, if there were going to be changes, how best that could work with some of your systems in place. So that's up and coming. So it could be that there are what I would view as positive changes to reduce barriers to APPs helping in our trials. So we'll keep you in the loop as that evolves.
And then the last topic we had up here, it's coming up on a year now, or over a year now, since our pharmaceutical management branch had a policy allowing greater flexibility for sites to ship oral agents to patients in between visits, so that patients didn't necessarily have to come in if it was just to receive an oral agent. And I think in July, we were able to add, it might have been later than that, we were able to add in the funding that's available to sites to help defray the costs associated with that shipping. The policy for allowing shipments is going to continue at least through the end of this year, and we're looking at whether it's something that can be extended further than that. But specifically around the funding and the policy more generally, we wanted to get feedback potentially on, if you were aware of the funding, if the funding is helpful, or if your site just doesn't end up being in a situation where you have to ship that many oral agents, because we were a little surprised that, we haven't seen as much funding used for this as we anticipated. And so we just want to make sure we're understanding what's going on and if there's something that we can be doing better around that. So that was just another topic we wanted to put out there, but we also want to hear if there's feedback from all of you that we might not be aware of. So thank you.
And
Do
we're
you have any
happy to take
questions for Andrea or Grace? Anything in the chat, Annette?
Yeah, there is a question. Is there from the NCI or from the FDA, are they making progress towards continuation of remote and virtual consents as we've been able to do during this pandemic?
So that's one of the changes that was part of the pandemic. On, my personal opinion, I would be surprised if it goes away. I think everyone recognizes that it's something that is an improvement and that it fits within the regulations. And given that there's no reason to take away a good thing. I think there's, a lot of interest in continuing those types of policies. And that particular, it wasn't on here. Those policy changes didn't have an end date when they were announced. And so it's not something that needs to sort of be continually extended. I think a lot of those changes that have been in place, I foresee us keeping and definitely informed consent because, we haven't really heard any negatives.
And I am aware that the FDA is doing a sort of a electronic video consent process. So during COVID, so the fact that I think even the FDA is sort of working to pilot efforts to build upon remote consent, I think is a good thing.
Well, if they would only put it in writing so that our regulators can all breathe easier, that would be ideal and wonderful. Editorial comment from the peanut gallery.
Unfortunately, we're not regulators, so we agree.
Well, and in terms of making it something written in for NCI policy, that is something we can take back. We know
Right.
It's helpful to have written down. I'm not sure, it might be something that, they're working on updates to the CTEP Investigators Handbook and to other policies. I think that's actually a CIRB policy though. So we can let them know that it's helpful to know which ones are COVID policies and which ones are kind of in place.
Thanks. All right. Well, thank you for being with us again today at this meeting. You guys are always a wealth of information. I just appreciate how hard you listen and how much you take back and make it happen. You're kind of miracle workers. So thanks for being advocates on our behalf out here.
Grace?
Thank you, Connie.
Well, I feel like it's a real partnership because you help us identify, the barriers that are going on, and then we work together to solve them together because we can't do our job without, this partnership.
Grace,
All right, guys, all you attendees heard that, so make sure you send your cards and letters into Andrea and Grace with ideas and requests.
Please do. We knew we wanted to make sure you all had our emails, so they're there. We open them. We try to get them heard.
Annette, did you have something?
I just wanted to say that there was a comment that came in to say that from Stephanie Smith that they are aware of the funding for shipping oral agents, but it's rarely needed because the dispensing usually occurs at this time of the study assessment.
That's helpful. Yeah, it's hard. It was hard for us to tell how much might be expected. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
And Stephanie, one other question so does that mean some of the study assessments couldn't be done virtually, like through telehealth? Because that was one thought we had thought maybe might happen during the pandemic at least.
And some of the disease assessments might not be able to be,
Right, yes.
but hopefully we'll be able to, I think there's a lot of interest across NCI, across the groups, and trying to reduce patients coming in except when really necessary. So I think we'll be continuing to look at this.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Good to see you virtually.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thanks for being here.
Have a good meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Frank, go ahead and move our slides forward if you would. Next up are 3 more miracle workers in the group chair's office, here to share with us some updates related to the group chair's office, study finance and membership, Casey Dawson, Pat Mize, and Kyle Teague. So we'll turn it over to you, and if you can advance the slide, Frank, we'll let them tell us when to move it again. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us. It is such a pleasure to be able to get together, even if it's just virtually. Hello from sunny Portland. I am Casey Dawson, Assistant Director of Administration, and I wanted to echo Grace and Andrea's comments. Thank you just so much for being here virtually. We appreciate the time you're taking to join us here, and it's nice to be in person, but we've also gotten really great feedback about accessibility to members virtually, and some of you I know wouldn't ordinarily be able to make it, so I'm glad that you're here with us. Next slide. Thanks so much. I don't have a ton to update on today, but I wanted to highlight SWOG Clinical Trials Partnerships, also known as CTP, which may be new to some of you, but maybe not. So SWOG CTP has been around for quite some time, helping to facilitate collaboration between SWOG and industry on the NCI side of the fence. So if your site's receiving non-federal funding, that's through the SWOG CTP mechanism. But there is some new activity going on that side of the fence. We're engaging industry in new ways and expanding the portfolio of non-federally funded trials through our preferred partnership program. And so some of you may have attended the session yesterday, the update meeting, and heard all about some of the exciting things to come on the industry supported trial roster. And I'd like to ask you to stay tuned to SWOG News for those opportunities. Next slide, please. But I also came here to ask you for help. So as we set this up, again, echoing Grace and Andrea, we want to make sure that we're keeping this familiar for sites. We want to make sure that we are easing the burden at the site level. And so I'm looking for input from you all on what works and what doesn't work on these types of trials, as far as site feasibility assessments, IRB interactions, budget and site payments. We think we're doing a pretty good job of outlining the cost, but we want to hear from you. Also, your experience with ETMF and CTMS systems. So as we get this infrastructure set up, I would love to hear from you on your experience working with these different types of systems and what kind of burden they are at the site level. We are planning on using familiar systems like Rave. We're planning to use the funding agreements in place, and we're forming a relationship with the Western IRB to use as our central IRB. So I'm interested in hearing from you on that as well. Next slide, please. This is my contact information, and I think if you go to the SWOG website, my phone number is also there. Please feel free to email me or call me. This SWOG CTP generic email comes to me as well. And for more information on CTP, you can go to the Hope Foundation, and there's a link to the CTP website. We're still in the early planning stages. We've got some really exciting things coming down the pipe for you. And if you just stay tuned on available studies and ways to participate, we'll make sure to get the info out to you. And I think up next, I'm happy to take questions, but I think up next, Pat and Kyle wanted to share some information.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Usually I talk a lot and I have not many things to say today. So basically just popping into Site Ops to remind everyone who I am and what I do. Kyle Teige, and I kind of oversee all the federal site payments at the group chair's office, but also just available for any funding questions that you may have. So we have set aside some little virtual office hours this Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And there's a link to the networking lounge. So if you have a question about site payments or the new agreements that we've been working on, these capitation subawards, or just anything in general, check out that link. The lobby is really cool. You can ask your questions now, or I put various contact information on there. Obviously my email address, my colleague Mariella, who oversees all the non-federal payments out of the Hope Foundation. And then if you just don't know what pot your question falls under, just send your inquiry to funding@swog.org, and our wonderful team will address it. So that's all I have, and I hope everyone is well. And I think we can pass it on to whoever is next.
Anything from Pat then, or did you incorporate that too, Kyle?
I was speaking for Pat and I, so we should be good from the GCO. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Pat. I'm here. Hi, guys.
All right.
That's it.
Anything in the chat, Annette, or any questions for the group chair's office team?
Nothing in the chat.
All right, well then, next up will be Dana Sparks. Dana, we're glad that you're not on jury duty tonight, and welcome. We appreciate that you're here. We'd love to hear your updates about what's happening in operations and all the worlds that you lead there at SWOG.
I actually don't have specific updates. I do want to give a shout out to Courtney Willie and Tiffin. Have really put a lot of work into making sure that this virtual meeting runs well. And it's been, you know, we had the experience of doing a truncated version in April of last year, and then a fuller version for the fall meeting. And I think they kind of hit their stride with trying out new ways for us to be able to touch base with each other and kind of have more of a real meeting experience. And I really appreciate the work that they've done. We're continuing to, I think most of the office is generally still working from home, although we have more and more people who are going in more often, and I'm starting back in person next month. So it'll be interesting to see how things have changed and getting accustomed to not working in my pajamas anymore. But the office is still doing well. We appreciate you guys letting us know anything that we can do to help your experience in working with SWOG studies, and feel free to reach out to us and ask any questions that you have. But the accrual has actually remained fairly good for the latter part of last year. Right now we're going through a phase where we're closing some big studies, and we have a few more that will be opening soon, but we're kind of in a little bit of a lull. So while the accrual itself has been fairly steady since the latter part of last year, we're in a little bit of a dip just because we don't have studies open. But I think that's all I have.
Do we have any questions for Dana from anyone? Any comments, requests? All righty, thank you for being with us, Dana. Thanks for your good work.
Absolutely.
Next up, we have membership, and representing membership tonight, we have Leslie Weisenstein from, again, Operations Center, sharing with us some updates.
Hi there. It's nice to see everybody to a certain extent, and hope everybody's been staying safe and as well. We don't have too much this time around as updates. Did want to let you know we've had a slight department change recently. As Dana had mentioned, initially Tiffin Dupree has recently transferred from the membership department over to our meetings department to provide support to the meetings manager. And obviously that has been going quite well. And I, in turn, have taken on the VA support role with her departure from our department. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me or give me a call. And the only other thing we really had to mention is many of you know that the SWOG specific credentialing documents are no longer required if you want to submit new investigators or transfer investigators or welcome backs and so forth. We haven't had a chance to put that on our website yet, but I've been trying to email many of you over time and let you know that. So the only thing you need to do is if you want to bring on somebody with your sites is to go either through RUMS or NCorpSys, depending on your institution, and submit a credentialing request. And we'll see that on our end and get it taken care of. The good thing about that is it has decreased your wait time on getting people activated with your sites. So we've seen that to be a good change and hope you all have as well. And I think that's all I have.
Thank you for that change, Leslie. That does reduce duplication for the sites. It's much appreciated, although we always love working with you guys. You're very efficient.
Oh, we're still here and we're still working, so thank you.
All righty, so next up, we'll hear from our Statistics and Data Management Center, some insights from Rodney Suter, Program Director of Therapeutic Studies. And I see that Kathy Rankin is also on the phone in case there's other questions that come up, but take it away, you guys.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, well, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where your time zone is located. Seems to be a trend that our offices don't have too many updates, and that goes for the same for the SDMC, but I do have a few slides to go through. Next slide. And next slide. So shortly after the pandemic kicked in last year, SWOG relaxed policy 33 that addresses our expectation and IPR guidelines, where the reports continued to generate and were sent by email to the head CRAs, but we weren't issuing any warning or suspension letters to sites that were out of compliance. We wanted to give you a heads up that we're going to reinstate monthly monitoring of these starting in June. For now, we'll continue to exclude specimen submission from IPR, and we'll focus on initial forms, vital status updates, and post-baseline form submission. And that being said, many sites continue to be in good standing now, but special circumstances will be taken in consideration. So if you have concerns once this is back in place, please reach out to Phyllis Goodman to work with you and provide additional guidance. Next slide. It seems like at every meeting there's always an update about our registration trials and SWOG, and this meeting is actually no different. GU study S1605 is pretty close to heading to the FDA. And leading up to this, you have likely noticed an increase in queries and more active follow-up by the data coordinator, both by phone and email, asking for your attention to address and close out open queries and submit any outstanding data. In addition to this, we plan to freeze the charts in Rave. We were originally planning for this next Friday, but it's been pushed off a week or two. So mostly for the month of May, those charts will be frozen and then they'll be unfrozen probably by the end of May, early June. Melanoma study S1404 recently went through a similar freeze and unfreeze process that occurred between mid-March and the beginning of April. There may be further queries issued for this study, and you can likely expect other SWOG FDA trials to go through the same process as they close and the data are ready to submit to the sponsor. Next slide. Many of you are likely already in the know about some upcoming NCTN-Wide umbrella trials that are being developed, where one of the lead protocol organizations are responsible for the master or screening protocol, but all other lead protocol organizations will participate in and run sub-studies within them. The first trial is NCI Combo Match, a precision medicine trial that will be a signal-seeking study testing combinations of targeted agents. The master protocol will be managed by ECOG Akron, and the expected launch date is late 2021. The next trial is MyeloMatch. They'll enroll patients at the time of initial AML or MDS diagnosis, screen for mutations, then assign them to targeted sub-studies. Patients with remaining disease after initial therapy will be screened again for assignment to sub-studies of subsequent treatments. And the screening protocol will be managed by SWOG, and the expected launch is also late 2021. Next slide. The last trial is iMatch, the next generation NCI precision medicine trial. Patients will get immune profile testing and be assigned to a sub-study based on their tumor mutation burden and tumor inflammation signature. The screening protocol will also be managed by SWOG, and then the expected launch for the pilot study, S2101, is planned for later this year, with the full trial expected to launch in early 2022. There'll be more information forthcoming on these as our target dates draw closer, and you can expect further details to be communicated in mailings from our operations office, sent out via the CRA listserv, articles in the CRA newsletters, and other postings on the CTSU website. Next slide. The protocol deviation form is another initiative you may have already heard about through CTSU's website, or if you attended the webinar they held back in December. This is an NCI pilot where each lead protocol organization is asked to select one FDA registration trial they had in development to utilize a form that collects all deviations that occurred for a patient while on study. SWOG initially selected a lung map sub-study, S1900E, to later find out that they preferred us not to use a sub-study for this pilot. SWOG didn't have another registration trial in our pipeline to use, so we got approval to add it to S2012, which is a study in the Early Therapeutics Committee, currently in development. Once this is active, if you have any questions about the form, there is a link here to read through a protocol deviation guide in this screenshot here. In addition, the form will be reviewed by our auditing team in Rave. So there's an email distribution list on the form to reach out to them at qamail@swog.org. Next slide. And then the last thing we wanted to bring to your attention is to study S1912CD, which is the first study SWOG will activate that registers both participants and their spouse caregiver to. It's a randomized trial addressing cancer-related financial hardship through delivery of a proactive financial navigation intervention through the Cancer Care Delivery Research Committee. It's only open to NCORE sites in the United States. The primary objective is to determine whether a proactive financial navigation program for participants planning to receive anti-cancer treatment decreases the risk of a material household financial hardship over 12 months among participants with newly diagnosed or recurrent metastatic solid tumor or a newly diagnosed hematologic malignancy and their spouse caregivers. Next slide. So some interesting things to note for this study is there will be 2 separate registrations, one for the participant and one for the spouse caregiver, each of which will receive a unique participant ID number. For data entry purposes, sites will only use the number assigned to the participant. Rave will roll out folders that are specific to the participant, the spouse caregiver, and one that applies to both. Caregivers may also go off protocol separately, and there'll be off protocol forms submitted for each. The expected launch for this is next month. If you plan to open this at your site or are interested in more information, you should plan to attend the kickoff meeting held this week on Thursday at 1 o'clock Central Time. You may also send questions to the cancer control distribution list noted here. And that's all I had from the SDMC. Thank you.
I thought you didn't have much to share, Rodney. That's kind of a lot.
I know I shouldn't have started out that way, right?
No, you got some good stuff going on. Do we have any questions or any chat communications in that?
Nothing in the chat.
Kathy, anything you'd like to share? I know that you're here in support of the greater good.
Nope, Rodney did a fabulous job.
Okay. All right, well then let's switch gears a smidgen here and go over to the quality assurance updates with Elaine Armstrong. Welcome, Elaine.
Hey, Connie. I don't really have much. I just wanted to, I think everybody knows we've been doing a lot of remote audits, and I'd say in the foreseeable future, the registration study audits will primarily be conducted remotely. As far as treatment audits, it's kind of a mixed bag. We have discovered that when we audit remotely, we get about 25% fewer cases done per day per auditor. We just cannot get things done as easily and quickly as we do when we're on site. We've done several remote audits of up to like maybe 30, 35 cases, and it's gone well. If we can get access to the EMR, which, over a year ago, hardly, I'd say 5% of sites would have given us access to their EMR. And suddenly, when they're trying to keep you from coming on site, a lot of sites opened it up, and we do have EMR access, but it's still not, across the board.
So if it's a really large audit we're talking, 60, 70 or more cases, if you're not able to give us EMR access, we really, really do not want to do the audit remotely. It's just a lot of work for us. It's a lot of work for the sites because then you have to scan all your documents and you have to upload them into the source document portal in CTSU. So as of on May 1st, the audit team will be 100% vaccinated, and we are, I'm actually doing an audit. There's a whole group of us doing an audit next week, and another group that did an audit this past week. So we're kind of we're playing it by ear. And if a site absolutely is not open to us coming on site, that's fine. We'll see what we can work out. But so I expect at least in the next maybe 6 months, we're going to still have a mixture, some remote, some on site. And we'll just work with you. There are quite a few audits on the schedule, treatment audits on the schedule for summer and early fall. So, if you probably know if you're on the schedule. So, but that's really all I have, and we'll just work with you and make it work the best we can.
Elaine, are there any common pitfalls that sites are making or things that you're seeing in audits right now, especially because workflows are so disrupted? People are working remotely, patients aren't in as much. Are there things that you can share with sites that we should be alert to, or secret weapons that you've found, or any guidance?
No, no, not really. I mean, and of course, accrual dropped off a lot. And not across the board, but since accrual dropped off late, I mean, kind of like last spring, some of the audits we're doing, there's very few cases we're auditing that are fairly recent registrations. Mostly we're looking at registrations that occurred prior to COVID. Now, obviously there's follow-up and all kinds of assessments that have had to be done. And, but because of all of the guidance sent out by the NCI and SWOG, allowing telehealth visits and phone calls and, those types of substitutions, that seems like that's providing the necessary, flexibility for the sites. And we understand that. And we're trying to be, as a comment, we're looking at it with flexibility in mind too. And if we can see that you've made every effort to follow the protocol as close as possible, that's all we're looking for. So I wouldn't say that we're really seeing any major concerns.
All right, thank you. And I think to put in a plug, are you doing a session for open forum? I believe I saw that on the agenda.
Yes, yes, and I'll be talking a little more about remote audits during the open forum.
So a good time for all of us to pick up open forum for sure to hear more detail. Well, thank you, Elaine, and thanks for being flexible and understanding. I know it's much appreciated because, as you know, we all freak out at our sites and it's a very difficult time, let alone we're not even in our offices the way we're used to be. So we just appreciate the graciousness that your team extends.
Sure.
All right, our next segment then, thank you, Elaine, is Carolyn Porter from the CTSU, Senior Technical Project Manager, here to share with us. For those of you who sometimes look at different places throughout the meeting, this is really a lot of compressed information, but a really important update because this is where CTSU is with us here at SWOG this season for spring. So thank you, Carolyn, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks. And just like Dana from membership said, they're still working. CTSU is still working. We have a lot of initiatives going on. You heard Elaine talking about remote auditing because of COVID-19. We were able to provide functionality in the source document portal to do remote auditing. So we're working on a lot of stuff this past year. So next slide. Next slide. So what we'll talk about today is 3 initiatives. The first one is the Rave to CTEP errors integration for serious adverse events. We'll also give an introduction to the protocol deviation form. That was also mentioned earlier in the presentations as well. And then we're making improvements to delegation of task log, like Grace Mishkin said earlier from NCI, that we have heard that sites, as we ramp up with more studies that require a DTL, there's a lot of cumbersome or repetitive activities that are needed to develop a DTL for sites. So we're making improvements to that. And we'd like to hear back from you too. So if you have thoughts on how to improve things, even after this meeting, please feel free to reach out to CTSU with your ideas, because we would like to continue to make improvements. Next slide. So let's first talk about serious adverse event integration with Rave and CTEP errors. Next. So first, this is just an overview. The integration synchronizes adverse event data that's entered in Rave with information entered on the adverse event report in CTEP errors. The SAE integrated studies will send the AE data entered in Rave to CTEP errors only after a rules evaluation call is run. The call happens each time an expedited reporting evaluation report form is saved. And then also with each call, all of the information from the AE form and Rave is passed to CTEP errors, and this will reduce the burden of double entry, and it will also provide a reporting recommendation in Rave. Next. So some best practices of what to do. So enter AEs in Rave as soon as they are known. Remember to perform the call anytime an AE is added, removed, or modified. And also verify that the AE call resulted in 0 errors, noted by either a recommended action of none, create, amend, or edit with no error message. Change the action from create to none in Rave if the investigator feels the recommendation to report is not warranted per the protocol. And then finally, use the hyperlink in Rave to move to CTEP errors when creating or amending an expedited report. Next. Okay, so these are the do not do slide. So do not create an expedited report directly in CTEP errors, thus bypassing the hyperlink in Rave, and this is for integrated studies, unless you're directed to do so by CTSU. And then some notes here for integrated studies, the site's ability to directly report in CTEP errors will only be available by special request starting in fall 2021. The A reports created using the hyperlink of Rave will always have the report ID and the ticket ID at the top of the report. If an AE report is created without using the hyperlink in Rave for those integrated studies, data between the two systems must be manually verified as matching. And then finally, do not attempt to change the action from amend to none if the investigator feels the amendment to the AE is not reportable. Amended reports are not delinquent as long as the amendment is handled via the integration. So that means it's not initialized in CTEP errors. Next. Okay, so this slide is about amendments and persistent adverse events. So data in CTEP errors that is not collected on the adverse event form in Rave can be modified in CTEP errors if amending a new or existing ticket. So no synchronization with Rave is required since the data is not collected in Rave. When the AEs persist across cycles with the same grade, Rave only sends one adverse event to CTEP errors. So that's reported on the initial cycle of the adverse event. There will not be multiple recommendations returned, one in each cycle, since technically it's considered the same AE reported across cycles. So end dates for persistent adverse events should only be entered on the last cycle that the adverse event occurred, since end dates must fall within the reporting period in which it is recorded. And then finally, the end date will auto-populate for all the preceding cycles, so you don't need to do that. Next. That might be it. Oh, one more. So in regards to supporting documents, we have some do's and don'ts for there as well. So please do use the hyperlink under Actions and CTEP errors to upload supporting documents to the source document portal. But do not use the old fax-based method process for submitting supporting documents, unless otherwise directed by the adverse event review team. I think that's being decommissioned at this time. Next. Okay. So moving on to the protocol deviation form, we're just going to do an introduction of the form here today, so very high level. Next. So why are we doing the protocol deviation form? We want to standardize the process for reporting all protocol deviations, and they're called PDs. And just to give a status of where we are with the project, we've developed the form through collaboration through NCI, CTSU, and the LPOs. We've also received feedback from one site, and we've also presented this process to the site advisory panel. We are currently in a pilot mode where we have 2 active pilots, one for Alliance and one for AMC. And other LPOs are also identifying pilot protocols as well. Next. So where you'll find the protocol deviation form in Rave, you'll find it at the, there used to be a red arrow. I don't know if that's on the next, I don't know what happened to animation, so I'm not sure if that's going to be next or not. But anyway, you'll see it on the left-hand side here at the bottom of the screen, protocol deviation form. So that's where you'll find it for subject. Next. Ah, there you go. There's the arrow. Next slide, please. And just to give you an idea of some of the fields that the site will enter, the date the protocol deviation was discovered, the deviation start and end dates, the information about the person who identified the deviation, whether the IRB or CIRB was informed of the protocol deviation. You'll also be able to select a deviation category. There's a drop-down list of different categories, and based on that category, you'll also select a standardized deviation term. So those will change based on the category you select. And then an inclusion or exclusion criteria. So that will be filled in depending on what deviation category you selected as well. Next slide. So this is more related to the deviation itself. You'll have an opportunity to enter the description of the deviation. So we'll give you several lines to do that in case you need to write a lot. Was an action taken, and if an action was not taken, why, and a description of the action taken. Next. And then finally, there'll be other items in the form that the LPO reviewer will fill in. So there'll be a checkbox for a critical deviation. The deviation review status, there'll be a drop down of statuses that the reviewer will fill in, and then who did the review and their role. Next. Okay, so just some information about the pilot. We're going to pilot 1 protocol per participating LPO. We want to ensure that the form captures the correct data and that stakeholders have the opportunity to provide feedback during the pilot phase. And then site staff are expected to enter all subject-specific protocol deviations into Rave using that protocol deviation form, unless the deviation is already entered on a COVID-19 deviation form. Any existing notification process for deviations, that's including notices to the CTEP Pharmaceutical Management Branch, should not change during this pilot. Next. And then finally, there is a protocol deviations guide. It's available through Rave and through a link in Rave, as well as on the CTSU members website in the resources section. And then updates will be shared on the CTSU members website and in the bi-monthly broadcasts. Next, I think that's all with protocol deviations. Yes. So now we'll get into the delegation of task log improvements. Next slide. So just a background and timeline of where we're going with this. Next slide. So as most of you may know, recently the DTL became required for all IND studies. So in order to help ease the burden of a widespread rollout, the CTSU is developing workflow efficiencies for sites. Since the sites are going to have to fill out a lot more DTLs, we want to make sure that there's an efficient way to do so. And just a note down here that the goal is to make enhancements to the existing features. So the business rules haven't changed. You know, when clinical investigators have to sign a DTL, how you would the rules for who you can assign to different tasks on the DTL, those have not changed, but we're trying to make it a lot easier to fill in all this information and get things signed. Next. So this just goes through some of the workflow efficiencies. Whoop. Something happened? Uh-oh.
Stand by.
All right. I can't see anything, so I don't know if something happened. Frank? Oopsies. All right, we'll just like. I'm going. Getting close. More. There, right there. Okay, so we kind of group these efficiencies into two groups. One for the clinical investigators and one for the DTL administrators. So for the clinical investigators, we want to streamline the signing process, especially when the CI must sign multiple DTLs. So sometimes, you know, if you're a clinical investigator across multiple sites for the same protocol, there's a lot of DTLs to sign. So we want to make that process as streamlined as possible. We're also updating the email notifications to link directly to the DTLs to be signed, so you don't have to figure out on the CTSU website how you're going to do your signing or where to go. And then we want to clearly indicate when DTLs require sign-off. Sometimes it was a little difficult to figure out what needed signing and what didn't need signing before. The next group of efficiencies is for DTL administrators. So for the DTL administrators, we want to simplify adding, removing, and reassigning persons across multiple DTLs. We also want to update the DTL cloning process to allow cloning one DTL to multiple DTLs. Cloning is just another word for copy, so it allows DTLAs to copy one DTL and create new ones from that. Next. So this is just a timeline graphic to give you an idea of where we are. Phase one, we're done with this. That went out in the website release back in January, I think January 28th. And so that was mostly geared to clinical investigators. And like I said before, that streamlined the approval process. We call that bulk signing. There was a revamp for all the notifications, meaning emails that go out to various folks. We also created a task assignment browser so you can look at task assignments across protocols and sites, so you can see everything in one spot. And then we made changes for international investigators. In phase two, this is what we're working on currently. This is in development. These are the efficiencies for the DTL administrators. So to be able to simplify operations across multiple DTLs, we're calling those bulk operations. And the ones we're going to focus on for this phase are add and inactivate, reassign, being able to reassign people to, you know, from one task to the other. We're going to handle that in another release. Crisp notifications for summary of recently signed DTL. So what we heard from DTLAs is that they don't know when their clinical investigators in some cases have signed their DTLs. So they have to either contact the clinical investigator or go look on the website. So you'll be able to subscribe to see when clinical investigators have signed DTLs. And then finally, in phase 3, I didn't really talk about this before, but we want to modernize the application. It's going to update the look and feel. We'll include bulk task reassignments, and we'll also look at improvements based on the feedback we got from other phases. So your feedback is very important to us. As we're going through, trying to improve things, if you think that there's more improvements needed, even if you don't know what a solution would be, please let us know. If you have ideas on really cool things that you'd like us to do, also let us know that as well. Next slide. All right, so we'll go over the phase 1 enhancements. Now, these are the ones that are already in the CTSU website. They're available as of January 28th of this year. Next. So the first process of improvement was to have one email to notify the clinical investigator of all DTLs ready for signature. What used to happen previously was, as DTLs were ready to be signed, the clinical investigator would get an email per individual DTL. So they get a lot of emails, and so it's a lot of clutter. So what we decided to do was have the clinical investigator receive one summary email bi-monthly, and it's set on the 1st and the 15th of each month. And it lists all DTLs that are ready for signature, and it includes a link to take the CI directly to the beginning of the process that they can sign all those details at once. They no longer have to sign them individually. Although they do still have that capability to sign individually, this process allows them to get it all done at one time. And then in addition, if you don't have your email, you can always go to the CTSU website, and there's a link there where you can say, what DTLs are ready to sign today. I just want to sign them all. So you don't have to wait for this email. And then we removed some of those individual emails that were, where we were sending out a lot of emails. And one was that signing email for each individual DTL. We took that out. The only one that's really remaining right now, and we thought this was critical. So when a DTL becomes unapproved, so that means that the DTL no longer meets the minimum requirements. We thought that was important enough to still send an individual email out. So that's where you'll see that individual, the only email that's delivered per DTL. And then also too, we realized there might be a time of need issue with getting DTL signed. So we provided a capability for the DTL administrators where they can click on a button and send an email directly to CI for a specific DTL that they want to be signed. Next. Okay. So the next process improvement we did was have a capability to allow the CIs to sign all available DTLs at one time. So they'll be provided with a one-page review of all available DTLs. And these are DTLs that are either an initial approval, changes that require sign-off, or annual review. And then sometimes we have new template revisions, and those also require site DTLs to be re-signed, but that situation's rare. The CI will be able to pick and choose the DTLs to sign from the list. So even though we say, hey, here's all the DTLs that are able to be signed, if they don't want to sign them all, they can just pick the ones they want to sign for now. Maybe they don't have enough time to review them all. They just pick the ones that they think are more important and they sign those now. And then also it allows them to sign using one electronic signature. They don't have to electronically sign each individual DTL as they do currently with the individual DTL method. And then just, the last bullet is that the original process still remains. If you want to go out there and sign individual DTLs, you can do that as well. Next. Okay, so this is going to show you some example. I'm going to go through some examples of the new functionality as well. But again, this is already available on the CTSU website. This is a screenshot of being able to sign multiple DTLs at the same time. I'm not going to go through the details of this. Basically, they click the big e-sign button up there, and it will e-sign as many as they've checked off. You see the check boxes on the left. They can check off what they want to sign, click that big e-sign button, and they get one electronic signature will sign them all. So the first section goes through those DTLs that have minimal changes. So we we pre-check those for you. So because we figured minimal changes, you know, you don't really need to review them that much. We'll show you the names of the people that have been assigned tasks that have minimal changes in that top section. The next section is for approved, unapproved, or annual DTLs with changes that require signature. So these are more substantive changes. Again, we'll list the people that have been assigned tasks on those DTLs. We'll break it out by the DTL, site DTL itself. And then finally on the bottom, the third section is any new DTLs. So these are newly created DTLs that have never been signed. For these, we're requiring that the CI look at each individual DTL for the new DTLs, or there's a way to look at all of the new DTLs at once so they can see all of the task assignments. And when they do that, they can come back to the screen and they'll be pre-checked in the checkboxes for them once they've looked at them. For the middle section, they don't necessarily have to go and look at individual details. They can just check off the ones that they know, okay, I understand what these changes are. They can just go check them off over here on the left. But they do have the opportunity to go and look at each individual site detail if they want to. As well, there's a capability to get all that information rolled up. So each section has a way that you can see all of the information for that section in one go, or you can see it per individual site DTL. And again, they just have, once they check off the DTLs that they're okay with, they just click the big e-sign button and they go and electronic sign them. Next. Alrighty, the next process improvement, and this is really also for the DTL administrators, not just the clinical investigators. So we're calling this a task assignment browser. It's a one web page that will allow searching across all protocols and sites for the DTLA or CI. And you'll be able to sort and filter, you know, based on protocol, site, or task name. There's a bunch of different filters you can select. You'll see an example on the next slide. But it allows you to easily manage task assignments from this view. So you'll be able to delete and reassign tasks. This is for individual tasks. So you'll be able to, for a particular task, be able to delete that specific task or reassign that specific task. Next. So this is what it looks like when you first come in here. You'll see all DTLs that you are either the clinical investigator or the DTL administrator for, and you'll see all task assignments for all site DTLs for which that's true. You can then filter if you're looking for something specific. So maybe if you're looking for all DTLs for a specific site or a specific protocol, you can search that way. You can search for DTL statuses, give me all the task assignments that for all the DTLs that have been approved. You can look for a particular person, so you can see across site DTLs what task assignments a particular person's been assigned. You can also do it by task name. You can say, I want to see all the Rave CRAs for all the sites on the DTLA for. You can also look for task statuses. So if you're looking for all active tasks, or maybe you're looking for tasks in a pending status. Pending status indicates that the task assignment cannot be assigned yet because the person does not meet all of the task requirements yet. And so by coming in here, for example, saying show me all pending tasks, you can see for all the details that you're the DTLA for example, you can see all the task assignments that have issues and look to see how to resolve them. You can also look by task reason. So if I want to deal with all my rostering issues today, you can go and search for all those task assignments that have rostering issues. And then this current view, this allows you to search for DTLs for which you're the CI or the DTLA. So it just allows you to narrow down that view for you. So it provides a lot of flexibility to see across site DTL. So we tried to give you a bunch of ways to filter and slice and dice the data. At the top of the table in the upper left-hand corner, there's also capability to export. So that little icon with the arrow allows you to export all this data. So if you want to put it in an Excel spreadsheet and review it that way, you can do that as well. The last column here on the table is an action column. The first icon, the two arrows going back and forth, that's to reassign that task to somebody else. And the X icon is to delete that task altogether. Next. So, these were a lot of improvements, done at one shot. We tried to come up with ways to help with getting the information you need on how to use these tasks. We have a one-page quick guide, as well as there's a 6-minute short video on how to do the signing process. And these are available in the DTL resources and the help topics on the DTL screens. And then also the help content was enhanced with the information about the task assignments. Oops. Hold on one second. I think. Okay. All right. Next. All right. These are quick slides, so we're not going to go through the details like we did for the first one. So this is phase 2. This is what we have in development. I just wanted to give you a sneak peek of what's going on. These are enhancements for DTL administrators. We're hoping to get this to you by Q2 2021 in time for when all IND studies require DTL. So we want to get this one, we're trying to get out a couple weeks before the deadline for when all studies are going to require, all IND studies will require a DTL, so that it will give you time to use this functionality to get your work done. Next slide. So the first process improvement is for bulk operations and DTL cloning. So for bulk operations, it will allow the DTLAs and CIs to assign tasks to persons across site DTLs and inactivate or delete tasks for a person across site DTLs. The bulk DTL cloning process allows for easy copying of all task assignments on one DTL to multiple DTLs. So those DTLs will, DTLAs who manage multiple sites with similar same site staff, they could just copy them over from one DTL to the other. We're going to try to also, there's a lot of stuff going on when you say, I want to assign one person to all these task assignments. There's a lot of validations going on. We're going to try to run those ahead of time so you and provide you warnings for when things don't make sense or you might run into issues before you actually submit your request. So the worst thing you want to have happen is you submit your request and you find out there's all these issues. So we're trying to do that ahead of time and give you enough information so you can make informed decisions. And then also we're going to allow the capability for the DTLAs and CIs to email the results of their request to themselves. So, after you do, say a bulk assignment for one person to 5 tasks on 10 DTLs, you'll get a results screen, and you can email that to yourself if you want to go and take action on anything later. Next. You can just cycle through all this. This was an animated slide, so I'll tell you when to stop. So keep on going. Next, 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 next. Okay, there we go. Okay, so whoops. Oh, there we go. So for the assign, bulk assignment, and bulk inactivate, the bulk operations kind of work the same way. Where you're going to find your person, you're going to choose the DTLs you want to work on, you're going to pick the tasks you want to work on, and then you're going to review those DTL task combinations to see if those make sense to you. And again, we'll provide pre-validations and warnings so that you'll know ahead of time for most things what the issues are going to be if you submit your request. So then once you submit your request, we'll have a wrap-up segment where you can view the results of that request, email them to yourselves, but then also, for example, when you assign people to tasks, the CIs will have to go out and in some cases, sign their for those task assignments. So they'll get that CI summary email on the 1st and 15th of the month, where they can go and sign whatever changes you made based on the operation you performed. Next. Alrighty, so the other thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new notification summary of recently signed DTL. So this is a crisp notification where you can subscribe to get emails whenever the CI signs a DTL. And then you can select the frequency at which you want to get these, so weekly or monthly, for example, and then what sites you want to get this information about and the network and so on. So we will not send this out automatically. You'll have to subscribe to get this notification. Next. Okay, just to give you an idea of what some of our next steps are, you saw a lot of stuff about, we did some process improvements and we're now on our next phase. So I kind of wanted to give a high level on where we're going from here. So next steps. Next, please. Okay. So again, we're going to release improvements for the DTL administrators. That's going to go Q2 of this year. We want to start working on the DTL application modernization. That's phase 3. So in the next couple months, we'll start working on that. We want to continue to solicit site feedback as improvements are rolled out. So please, if you have feedback, if you don't like the way things are working, or there's even with the new things or the old way that things are working, please let us know. If you have ideas on how to make improvements, we'd like to know that as well. We want to have more frequent engagement of sites during the development life cycle. So we're working with sites are volunteering to participate in user acceptance testing. We're working with the site advisory panel. We're trying to, this forum is another way that we're trying to get the word out. So we want to get your, put the information out there and get your feedback on what you think about it. And then finally, we want to develop a training plan for the new improvements to include the clinical investigators and DTL administrators, because it's no good if you put out all these improvements, but you don't provide a way to train anybody. So we want to make sure that we do that as well. You've seen that with the first phase where we did a video and we have a one-page, quick start, to help on the CIs on how to sign their DTLs. So we're going to continue forward with doing that and providing more opportunities for training. I think that's it. So any questions? That was a lot. I say it still uses paper DTLs for most studies.
Do we have anything in the chat coming in for CTSU, Annette?
Yeah,
she's reading one right now, Connie.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to. So one question was, my site still uses paper DTLs for most of our studies, which require staff to sign, initial, and complete a numerical writing sample. Wow. I realized it can be quite cumbersome to do for 20+ team members for multiple studies. Do you have suggestions on how we can make this process smoother for my site? So with the electronic version of the DTL, if for example, if a new protocol comes out and you have 20 sites where you have to do, create a DTL for each site, and you have similar people or similar site staff for each of those sites. So say that the same staff is working at all 20 sites. My recommendation would be that you create a delegation of task log for one of those sites and the people that you want to use, and make sure that everything looks good and that there's no issues with task assignments and the people are meeting all the task requirements, so things look good. And then use that as a template to copy that to the remaining sites, so that way you're not having to do this from scratch for each of those 20 sites. You can use, one as a template and use the cloning process that we'll be developing. It will be available in Q2 of 2021 to do that. We're also looking at a possibility of creating a universal or master site DTL that may help as well. That's still in early discussions, and depending on how that goes, we may or may not implement it. We're more of a fact-finding mission right now, trying to figure out like what sites, talking to sites and figuring out if that would be useful for them. So that's in the very, very early stages. So again, depending on what kind of feedback we get from sites, we may or may not go forward with a universal site DTL, but we are getting some feedback that would be useful as well.
Carolyn, this is Elaine.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment, SWOG has a requirement for the paper site authority log that's been in place since 2003, but we only require, and that's for all these studies that prior to the DTL and that still are not covered by the DTL. But we only require one log to cover all NCI sponsored studies. So it's not a protocol specific form. So if anybody's thinking that for our purposes, for audit purposes, that's not necessary. Just a single form is all you need.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay, thank you. A master site DTL, which would apply to all studies, would be extremely helpful. That's awesome. Thanks for the feedback.
Carolyn, I know we have some new staff on this call too. Do you have any tutorials or suggestions? We're talking so much alphabet soup on some level, but are there, the CTSU have some places people can look for additional information about all of the ins and outs and how-tos about all this stuff?
Yes, so there is a resources section on the CTSU members website. There is a lot of information there. So it would depend on like what thing you're specifically looking for. But if you go to the resources section, you should be able to find what you need. If it's too overwhelming for you, because like I said, we have a lot of training materials, please contact the help desk, CTSU help desk. They'll be happy to guide you to the right training or materials that for what you're looking for.
Thanks. That's always good to remember.
Connie, the last question I have here is, will these slides be posted?
And the answer is yes, at some point. Generally, when the SWOG meeting concludes, Courtney will post our presentation. So I would think within 1 to 2 weeks max, you'll be able to find the slide deck. Sometimes it goes up pretty quick, but just go back in and look in the meeting section where you logged on to for site operations, and ultimately the presentation, I think, will be posted there. All right, any other questions related to the content we've just heard for the CTSU segment or any of our other presenters? All right, well then.
Connie, there's a couple questions that popped up.
All right, go ahead, Annette.
Will there be a way to delete or archive DTLs for closed studies with no accrual, so there is not so much to look at?
Yes, we do realize, so we call those retired DTLs. So when a study goes to FATA complete, we put a DTL retired status. We realize that kind of clutters up the list of stuff, the site DTL. So I don't know if it went in yet, but we do have it in our list to do to make that so that when you first go in, you only see the ones you care about, not those retired DTLs. And then the next one. What do you recommend for sites that already have delegation of authority logs for individual studies? Is there a way to opt out of the DTL process? If not, then when do you recommend that sites replace their delegation of authority log with DTLs, or should we duplicate our DOAs and as DTLs? I'm not sure about the last part of this, but a DTL is required for any of those studies that require DTL, so you can't opt out of that. That's an NCI rule. But I don't know if Elaine or somebody else on the SWOG wants to comment on the delegation of authority logs part of this.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where the requirement is for a delegation of authority log, like who's requiring that. If they're not required for studies that require DTLs, so you wouldn't have to keep on doing them, I wouldn't think.
I mean, yeah, you know, we have this site authority log that is a generic one that covers all studies. So if you now have a DTL for like 1806, well, it really doesn't affect the paper site authority log because that's just a generic one that covers everything except the studies with a DTL. And just to comment, you know, we have that virtual lounge and we're doing a regulatory session on Thursday. So if you can log in to that on Thursday, I think it's from 11 to maybe 10 to 2 Central Time. Maybe we could discuss it in more detail if whoever has that question can log in at that point.
Yeah. The only thing I can say for sure is that if for these, studies that do require the electronic delegation of task log, that's what you have to use for it at a minimum.
I can suspect from just experience too and working with different sites over the years, some sites may also have their own local requirements about doing study specific processes according to their SOPs.
Yeah.
So I think in the beginning we had a lot of overlap with what the research base allowed, what other research bases were asking for, requiring and allowing. And delegation of authority logs were really popular with many for a long time. And then NCI rolled out the DTL for registration trials, and now more and more coming up. So there may be some local overlap. And I think if that's the case, transitioning to the must do, which is the DTL, but making sure there's a good paper trail and a note to file, and making sure whoever's leading that compliance work at your local site is on board with what you have to do now. Times have changed and not all of our compliance and site regulatory departments and local IRBs, et cetera, are totally in step with what has to be done for our NCI studies. Yep. I'm just wondering if that's a factor too.
Yeah. The other thing I do want to note is that we have on our to-do list to explore more where sites can add their own tasks to the electronic DTL. That's kind of been pushed down by because of other priorities, but we do have that on our to-do list to explore at some point, because we have heard from sites that they like using the DTL, and they also have that paper log, and they could get rid of the paper log if they could write in their own tasks, you know, for some of the things that aren't necessarily NCI's requiring, but their site might be requiring.
And I have one other question. It says, what trials will the protocol deviation form be used on? And is the plan to use on all future trials?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that they're piloting right now. But I know that it's going to be more widespread.
That's all I have here.
Okay.
Well, we are excited, Carolyn, that you're a techie, as you shared with us in the beginning of the meeting. We really appreciate that you're excited about making these optimization changes and the things that can customize and help us breathe a little bit better at our site level, because quite frankly, DTLs have been an absolute killer. They're drowning all of our membership and staff out. So we just appreciate the fact you've been listening and you're working so hard. We'll watch for the improvements. Just about at the magic hour here, and I want to thank, I don't have any brilliant closing thoughts today, although we have some for the next meeting, I'm happy to say, other than thank you for your ongoing commitment to this work. It's never easy in the first place, but especially in times like these where we've been asked to fly on the dime and flex at a moment's notice, and it feels like there's just constant movement with with lack of standardization on so many fronts because COVID is what it is and then we just deal with it. So thank you again for continuing to take care of our patients, making sure that they don't get lost in the shuffle, that we stay on track and keep our data up to date. I want to especially thank all of our speakers today. Courtney Willie, who as always facilitates this masterfully. Annette Bentley at the last minute, who joined us to help with the chat and supporting and cheerleading us all. And Joyce Tull, who helped put this together and wasn't able to be here with us today. And then most especially our patients and all of you who help support them in their journey. Thank you, take care, and enjoy the SWOG meeting. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.